Have you ever contemplated the fleeting brilliance of a shooting star, witnessing an ephemeral beauty that vanishes in an instant, leaving a bittersweet sensation of wonder and loss? This transient nature of bright moments amidst the vastness of existence, deeply echoes the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer. He invites us to look beyond the superficial illusions of lasting happiness and to confront the intrinsic truth of suffering as the undercurrent, that it shapes our human experience. Prepare for an immersion into a thought that challenges superficial optimism and invites us to a deeper and perhaps more compassionate understanding of our condition. Why does this relentless pursuit of a constant state of happiness so closely resemble trying to trap the wind with your hands? Why does the promise of perpetual contentment stubbornly slip through our fingers like fine sand? Schopenhauer, with his sharp and disillusioned mind, dissected this fundamental question of human existence with cutting honesty. His answer resonates through the centuries, disturbing and, at the same time, paradoxically liberating. Perhaps happiness, in its idealized and romanticized form, is merely a fragile construct, sandcastle built on the shore of an ocean of suffering. Imagine life not as a linear journey towards a peak of happiness, but as a relentless pendulum, swinging incessantly between the poles of pain and boredom. When we are driven by desire, we experience the pain of deprivation, of lack. When we momentarily achieve satisfaction, desire quiets down, but we are soon confronted with the emptiness of boredom, the absence of a stimulus that motivates us. And so, the cycle restarts, driven by a blind and insatiable force that Schopenhauer called the will. This will is not merely the sum of our conscious desires. It is a primordial force, a vital energy that permeates the entire universe. From the smallest insect to the most complex of creatures, impelling every being to the struggle for existence, for survival and reproduction, and, ironically, planting the seeds of suffering in each of us. We are constantly bombarded by a fabricated ideal of happiness, sold in seductive advertisements and propagated in superficial narratives. Social media becomes a showcase of idealized lives, where forced smiles and material achievements mask inner struggles. Even in our moments of introspection, we are haunted by the expectation of a radiant future, an earthly paradise where pain and dissatisfaction have no place. However, Schopenhauer confronts us with a cold and desolate reality. This relentless pursuit of a permanent state of happiness is the very source of our anguish. Incessantly seeking something inherently fleeting and unattainable can only generate an endless cycle of frustrated expectations and bitter disillusionment. It's like trying to quench your thirst by drinking seawater. With each sip, the thirst only increases. For the pessimistic philosopher, suffering is not a regrettable exception, an accidental deviation from the natural course of life. It is the very essence of our existence, the fundamental texture of the tapestry of life. Our insatiable desires imprison us in a perpetual state of lack, of longing for something we do not possess. And even when we achieve an object of desire, the satisfaction is invariably ephemeral, soon replaced by a new longing, a new lack to be filled. This chronic dissatisfaction, this constant restlessness, is the indelible signature of our earthly journey. If we carefully observe our own trajectory, our balance will invariably tip towards the side of moments of longing, struggle, loss, and pain, compared to the rare and fleeting instances of full contentment. The will manifests itself in a myriad of forms, from the visceral need for food that impels us to seek nourishment to the powerful force of sexual instinct that ensures the continuation of the species, passing through the complex web of ambitions that throws us into a relentless competition for status, power, and recognition. However, in each of these manifestations of the will, Schopenhauer identifies the bitter seed of suffering. Hunger brings with it the piercing pain of deprivation. Sexual desire often culminates in disillusionment, in painful bonds of dependence, or in irreparable losses. An excessive ambition invariably confronts us with the envy of others, with our own dissatisfaction, and with the bitter realization of the transience of success. We are like intricately manipulated puppets dancing on a dark stage, controlled by the invisible strings of this blind force, naively believing in our freedom of choice, while we only the commands of a greater power that resides deep within us and that manifests itself in every aspect of our interaction with the world. Consider that object of desire that finally crossed the threshold of your reality. That gleaming car in the garage, coveted designer garment, that state-of-the-art technological gadget. The initial wave of euphoria, the feeling of completeness that accompanied the acquisition. How long did it truly last? Fleeting days? Perhaps weeks? Soon, the novelty wore off, the dust of routine settled, and the mind began to wander towards the next coveted item on the wish list. Or remember that idealized romantic relationship that inevitably succumbed to the trials of time, collapsing into tears and heartache. The incandescent intensity of the initial passion dissipated, giving way to the piercing pain of loss and the longing for what no longer exists. Schopenhauer would argue that this is the incessant and relentless dance of the will, a vicious and seemingly endless cycle of unsatisfied desire, ephemeral satisfaction, and the inevitable return to the primordial state of suffering. It is a futile search to fill a deep existential void with the acquisition of material goods and the pursuit of fleeting sensory experiences, an effort as vain as trying to contain running water with a sieve. Faced with this bleak yet undeniably lucid perspective on the nature of human existence, the question that inevitably emerges in our minds is there any way to mitigate this inherent suffering? To find some refuge in this incessant storm of the will? Schopenhauer, amidst his profound pessimism, glimpsed some tenuous glimmers of relief. Aesthetic contemplation, the immersion in the beauty of art and nature in a disinterested way, without the interference of our selfish desires, offers a temporary escape from the relentless dominion of the will, allowing us to experience a state of pure contemplation, of suspension of wanting. Compassion, the recognition of the suffering of others as a mirror of our own universal pain, can lead us to attenuate our innate aggressiveness and cultivate empathy, weaving bonds of solidarity and mutual understanding amidst the common struggle for survival. However, the ultimate liberation, the definitive escape from this vicious cycle of suffering, lies, for Schopenhauer, in the negation of the will itself. A state of conscious renunciation of selfish desires, of illusory attachments to the phenomenal world, and of the incessant affirmation of the individual ego. This negation does not imply annihilation or a plunge into nihilism, but rather a radical transformation of our relationship with wanting, a search for inner serenity that transcends the incessant and turbulent fluctuations of the external world. If this challenging and deeply introspective perspective has resonated with your own experiences, if you have felt a tremor of recognition in the face of this raw and disillusioned view of human reality, leave your mark with a like on this video. Share these reflections with those who may need to confront this uncomfortable truth. With those who still relentlessly seek a happiness that always seems to slip through their fingers. And if you yearn to explore more deeply the complex layers of our existence and the tortuous paths towards a more lucid and compassionate understanding of life, subscribe to the channel so you do unmiss the upcoming philosophical explorations that seek to unravel the mysteries of the human condition. Your comments and shares are the compass that guides this collective journey of discovery and reflection. Pause for a moment and allow your mind to delve into the unfathomable depths of your own being. What are the desires that secretly govern your most intimate choices and shape the course of your destiny? What are the illusions of happiness that you pursue with such fervor, investing precious resources of time, energy, and emotions in the vain hope of achieving a full and lasting contentment? Could this frantic search for a constant and uninterrupted state of euphoria not be paradoxically distancing you from a deeper and more genuine form of inner peace, a serenity that perhaps resides not in the incessant conquest of external objects and experiences, but in the acceptance of the intrinsically transient and impermanent nature of all things that make up our existence? It is crucial to understand that Arthur Schopenhauer's profound pessimism does not constitute an invitation to paralyzing nihilism or a state of resigned despair in the face of the inevitability of suffering. On the contrary, his philosophy represents an urgent call to lucidity, a courageous effort to demystify the empty and seductive promise of a perpetual and unattainable happiness that modern society incessantly sells us. By understanding the insatiable and fundamentally suffering nature of the will and its relentless pursuit of a satisfaction that invariably proves ephemeral, we can perhaps learn to moderate the intensity of our desires, to lower our unrealistic expectations regarding life, and to find fleeting, yet precious moments of serenity and contentment in the acceptance of reality in its entirety, with its passing joys and its inevitable sorrows. Observe the frenzy of our contemporary society, obsessed with unbridled consumption, perpetually fueled by the incessant creation of new needs and desires through persuasive and omnipresent marketing. Or contemplate the exhaustive and often desperate search for validation and recognition on digital platforms, where happiness is frequently staged, performed, and compared in a vicious cycle of envy, insecurity, and competition for virtual approval. Schopenhauer, with his extraordinarily insightful vision, seems to have anticipated many of the anguishes and anxieties that haunt us in the modern era, where the relentless pursuit of more and more material goods, more sensory experiences, and more social recognition often leaves us only with the bitter and persistent feeling of an inexplicable and ever-deepening inner emptiness. Perhaps the true freedom we so yearn for does not lie in the illusion of achieving the totality of our desires, but rather in the courage to recognize the ephemeral and at times fundamentally illusory nature of many of them. Perhaps the inner peace we so ardently seek is not found in the relentless pursuit of a constant and unattainable state of euphoria, but rather in the ability to cultivate serenity and contentment in the acceptance of the impermanence inherent in life and in the profound understanding of the inevitability of suffering as an intrinsic and inseparable part of the human experience. This is certainly not an easy message to assimilate, I know. But perhaps it is an essential message, a powerful antidote against the culture of toxic and superficial happiness that imprisons us in invisible chains, the chains of our own insatiable will and our incessant search for a satisfaction that always proves fleeting. Thus, each of us continues to navigate the turbulent and unpredictable waters of existence, driven by that mysterious and omnipresent force that Arthur Schopenhauer dared to unravel with relentless intellectual honesty. A force that impels us to long, to strive, to love, to create, and inevitably to experience pain and loss. But by recognizing this fundamental dynamic that shapes our human condition, by courageously confronting the illusion of a full and lasting happiness as the ultimate goal of life, perhaps we can glimpse a different path. A path that does not deny the reality of suffering, but embraces it with compassionate understanding as an inseparable part of our journey. And that seeks serenity not in the incessant pursuit of fleeting pleasure, but in the lucid and compassionate acceptance of the complex and multifaceted tapestry of reality in its entirety.